Welcome back to the My Aggie Nation Podcast. We got an all-Eagle crew here this week. Alex Miller's over there, and we're also joined by Robert Cessna of the Eagle because, he covers women's basketball, and women's basketball is all anybody wants to talk about here in Aggie Land. Cease, how's it going, and how are those drives back and forth to San Antonio?
Well, luckily I haven't seen a lot of cops, so that's always good the way I drive, you know that. So, and if A&M goes well, I'll have a couple more trips, and hopefully I'll avoid seeing the Smokies.
There you go. Hey, so Jordan Nixon, has just absolutely kind of captured the amazement of the A&M fan base here in the last couple of weeks. And what has her story been this year and covering her leading up to what everyone saw this week in her game-winning shot?
Well, I'm always amazed. Go back to the start. Always, you look right now, it's like she's an All-American. But let's go back to the start of the year. Gary didn't even want to name her as a starting point guard. When you stop and remember, it was 3 or 4 people competing for that job. You had Nixon, you had Mackenzie Green, you had Alexis Morris, who they didn't know was going to be eligible right away, but then she was. So, and Gary went in and didn't say that she would be the starter. Now, she did start from the get-go. Now, whether that was a little coaching ploy that he wanted to get the most out of her, but you go back to the start, that was the only position where they really didn't have anybody penciled in for sure, because the other 4 were seniors. And then you can honestly say, as the season went on, Nixon fit in there nice, but no one saw this come. She went into the tournament averaging 9.5 points per game. Her best game was 19 points. And when you start looking how post-oriented Gary always is, when you have Jones in there and Johnson that are both going to play professionally, probably not in the WNBA when it's all said and done, but go overseas. Then you had Streaky Wells. You had Wilson, who he has touted all along as the person he probably wants to step up and take shots. So you had all these options. And right now, LeBron James, everybody in the world knows that A&M's point guard is Jordan Nixon. But go back to the start. If Gary says he saw that coming, his nose is a little bit longer right now. Because when you go back and look at the quotes early in the year, he didn't even know who was going to win that job.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comparisons on social media between Jordan Nixon and AC Law. Alex, what do you think? And Cease, what do you think? Is this a good comparison?
I think the comparison would be Jordan Nixon to Kennedy Carter. And you think about the games that Kennedy Carter had in the NCAA tournament. She just took over. You think about when they played DePaul her freshman year, and then it was Marquette her sophomore year when she actually dished the ball to Shimbria Washington for that 3-point shot. And, they lose to Notre Dame a couple of times, but Kennedy posts over 30 points. That's the comparison I would make. I see the comparison with AC, though, just kind of that X factor, that clutch player in crunch time. That's the person you're going to get your ball to. But, yeah, what do you think, Cease?
Well, I always have to laugh. We live in the era of social media. So if I'm able to make a good joke, I could have the best joke in the world here in the next 15 minutes through social media. We want to go to the nth degree right off the bat. And, Alex touched on it. It wasn't that long ago that A&M wiped out a 17-point deficit to beat the ball. And they mobbed Kennedy Carter, and she was going to be the next best thing since a new Mexican food restaurant opens in Bryan College Station. Let's look at things and let's hold it, a little bit, put the bridle on it, put the reins on it. But I will say this, we're not around her enough this year because of COVID, but she seems so level-headed. She took over both games without being a gunner. You think about how many people could have hit big shots against Iowa State, but didn't. Wilson took 17 shots. And she was pretty bad. It's not like Nixon hogged the ball. She hogged the ball as the game went on because she had to. She was in when making shots. The fact that she's a sophomore and the team will be built around her next year coming back, the future's unlimited. Let's give her her due. She was recruited by Notre Dame when Notre Dame was winning the national championship. I mean, they had high expectations for her. So she is not chopped liver. She's a little bit more like the Brazilian steakhouse instead of just another Mexican food restaurant. So let's see what she can do. But this is a great building block. This shows that the cupboard won't be bare after those 4 seniors walk out. Because I never thought, I said, man, 3 months ago, I'm saying, like 2 months ago even, I'm saying, man, Gary's going to have a big rebuilding job. Yeah, Zay Green's nice. She's back. Morris is back. But there's going to be a lot of holes. But if she continues to play like that or even get better, when you have a point guard, you've got something. And you guys touched on about AC Law. That's a great comparison, because if you have a good point guard, you'll be in almost every game.
Yeah. So, A&M fans, I would argue even the A&M team thought that heading into the selection Monday that they were going to be or had a good shot at a number 1 seed, and they fell to number 2. But now here's 2 games where it went down to the wire in the first 2 rounds of the game. And in the second game, A&M needed overtime. What has happened so far, Cease, in this tournament that has made what A&M thought would be maybe an easier walk than in the years past into the Sweet 16 a lot more difficult?
Well, it's interesting, as I had really time, and I want to write this column, but I'll touch on it now. I think Gary Blair's, mantra and just the way he is, they love the underdog role. And you think throughout all his career at SFA, Arkansas, he is amazing at teaching underdogs and, that kind of mentality, even a 2011 team. You think about this year, how good this team played to get to the point where they beat South Carolina for the SEC regular season title. I'm thinking all along, this is a team that could win the national championship. And then right after they walked off the court for beating South Carolina, they are a shaky 3-1. They beat LSU looking not that bad. And then they just totally, was outplayed by Georgia. Even though it was a close game, I didn't get the feel that A&M really played hard that game. And so I said, okay, you win the regular season title, you have a little bit of letdown. But then they also struggled now the last 2 games. And what happens when you struggle? I don't want to say it's all on A&M, because a lot of times it's matchups. And you guys know basketball a lot. Well, sometimes it's matchups. And I think both those teams were bad matchups. And when you have a bad matchup, you can't play with a lot of confidence. So suddenly you look like you're lost. You're not playing well. Iowa State, man, the way they hit A&M won, even though Iowa State hit 16 of 33s. That's amazing. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of teams who wouldn't want to play that Troy team the way that they played, because those couple of those girls could hit fadeaway jumpers just about better than any men's team you've seen, and that no one knew because they just didn't play. But to answer your question is, I think A&M's waiting to get to the point where they're the underdog. And if they win this next game, then they'll be the underdog against North Carolina State. And I look for them to play better against Arizona, because I think hopefully it'll be a better matchup from them. But I give you a Gary Blair answer, my long-winded as I ramble. I just think they played a little tentative matchups or whatever, but I think there was some sense of accomplishment after beating South Carolina to win the regular season title. But I do think this team definitely needs to play better if they want to make the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. 16 threes will knock off just about any team on almost any day. And that was impressive by Iowa State. Well, you touched on Arizona a little bit. Let's we'll probably talk about it again down the line, but it's always worth pontificating on. What is the ceiling for this A&M team? Do you think? I know. Do you think a Final Four run, a national championship game, a national final run is in the tank? Where's your barometer right now, 2 games in?
Well, I have to laugh because I saw Charlie Cream. He went ahead and reseeded the 16 teams left. I think let's not forget one thing else. The SEC was not as good as we all thought. 6 seeds going in to the tournament, and you're thinking like, wow, Tennessee, Arkansas, man, Georgia, A&M, man, the SEC is so good. 2 teams are left. South Carolina A&M, and if one shot goes the other way, only one SEC team would make the Final 16. And it's a little bit like the Big East or the American Athletic Conference, wherever UConn is. It was them and everybody else. Bottom line is SEC was not that good. Their middle teams got beat pretty bad when you consider Arkansas loses, to Wright State, and then Wright State gets killed the next game out by Southwest. So the ceiling, man, if A&M lost to Arizona, it wouldn't surprise me. If A&M plays for the national championship, it wouldn't surprise me, because A&M does have all the ingredients, but they just haven't put it quite together yet. And I think a lot of that is because Wilson hasn't played. Wilson's played really two bad games. It's almost like she's forcing it. She is, to me, their best all-around player. They need more out of her. They need, Jones and Johnson are missing bunnies all the time. I mean, they're still shooting a combined, I looked at about 50%, but they should be shooting about 75%. They're going up against shorter girls, and they're missing 2-foot and 3-foot bank shots, and you just can't do that. So, and I know it's frustrating to Gary because they should be playing better. And, it's nice to be complaining, I guess, about a Sweet 16 team you're covering about how bad they are. I think we'd all love to be talking about how bad Buzz's team would be right now if they were still playing. So once again, it doesn't take fans or media long to be so callous to say, oh man, they're playing horrible. They're shooting 40%, they're turning the ball over. But yeah, Travis, bottom line is if I'm speeding back trying to get a ticket, after the Arizona game, because they're out of it, wouldn't surprise me if I got to go back. And, right now I'd say Maryland might be, if you pick one team that really looks good and no one wants to play. And of course, A&M wouldn't have to worry about Maryland until they get to the finals. But I like this bracket. Arizona, win that, you probably play NC State. And even if you win that, you play Connecticut. And I even like that matchup. So the bracket is set up for a lot more Gary Blair FaceTime nationally.
Yeah, and going back a little bit to Gary Blair's team and strategies, I mean, his teams always are good when when they have the ability to work the ball into the post and when the post is making shots.
You got to give him a lot of credit because you can, once again, you can nitpick, but I thought they're probably going to lose both games, and they found a way to win it. So that goes a lot of coaching, a lot of players not giving up. And, the way they came back and won that Iowa State game, and Iowa State looked a little rattled finally in the fourth quarter. It'd have been so easy for A&M to just give that game up and say, well, heck, doesn't matter. We're guarding these girls hard for 25 seconds, and they're hitting threes all the time. Remember, they're 16 out of 30. They probably rebounded half their misses. So, I mean, on those threes, it was the fact that they won that game. Iowa State could have played just about anybody in the nation the other night, and they'd have won.
Let's shift. Well, A&M women's basketball hits the court again Saturday night. Cecil will be out there. Be sure to follow Aggie Sports and check the eagle.com and pick up the paper to see all the recaps and the previews for that. Let's shift gears. On Monday, A&M football starts spring practice. We talked to Jimbo Fisher yesterday. Let's just start out simple. What is the one thing that you two are looking for most, or looking forward to most, or the top storyline for you two heading into spring football? Cease, go first.
I just want to wait to see that offensive line. I'm getting back to it. I stuck to that last year, and I think that was a good thing to stick to. And I said, if the offensive line is good, Kellen Mond will be good. I'm saying this year coming up, if the offensive line is good, the quarterback will be good.
Yeah, I'm right there with Cease. I'm really curious to see what this offensive line shapes up looking like. We know there's one piece for sure, and it's Kenyon Green, but we have no idea where he's going to line up. Jimbo said he can line up everywhere, even center. So, the best guess is he's either going to stick at left guard or slide out to left tackle. But beyond that, it's anyone's guess what's going to happen. The only other guy we've really seen that's coming back is Layton Robinson. He played a little bit of guard last year against South Carolina. He actually played really well in that game too. But, A&M, it's almost a clean slate. They've got the transfer from Tennessee, Jameer Johnson. They've got that JUCO player, Jordan Moko, that they signed, and Bryce Foster. He's a highly touted 5-star recruit that was kind of the big prize right before that early signing period, but he's not going to be here till the summer. And so even if we get a glimpse of what this offensive line looks like here in the spring, I'm just not sure that we're going to really know what it looks like until fall camp, or honestly, maybe even a couple of games into the fall. So, we got a guest appearance at the Cessna household.
Chester's a little quiet. What does Travis think? If you and I agree, that's kind of dangerous. Does Travis agree with us?
Well, I think the easiest thing
that would be really bad.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, yes, I am curious to see what the offensive line looks like, but I had another answer. I'll go with that.
Wow.
I think the easy one to go with, of course, is any year with a quarterback battle kind of makes our lives a little bit easier because there's lots to write about. It's been a couple of years since we've had a real true quarterback battle in the fall, and to see who comes out of that. I mean, there's what it appears to be 3 really, really good options. I think that Hayes King's probably going to be the leader in the clubhouse, but Zach Calzada, by every indication, has been making some moves, and Eli Sowers is impressed coming in. So quarterback battle always has me a little bit excited because there's lots to follow there. But if you want to talk about something that popped up since we talked to Jimbo Fisher yesterday, I'm excited to see what Baylor Cupp can show at the tight end position, because as Jimbo Fisher said yesterday, Jalen Weidemeyer is going to be out of spring ball because of a freak accident cut to his finger that required surgery, and Blake Smith is going to be out because he kind of retweaked that knee that he hurt last year. And so it's going to be Baylor Cupp's time to shine. He's been here 3 seasons, the past 2 during fall camp. He's hurt himself and hasn't been able to play. And he, the interesting thing, and I'm sure people do remember this, but coming into A&M 2 years ago, he was the guy. He was going to be the front runner and the guy to take over for Jay Sternberger before he got hurt. And then it was Jalen Weidermeyer's job, and he's embraced that fully to the point where now everyone might be a little nervous that Jalen Weidermeyer is hurt and they're left with Baylor Cupp. So I think it's going to be an interesting spring ball for Baylor Cupp to see how he can take any hold on that tight end position, one that Jimbo Fisher has proven that he utilizes a lot.
Funny you should mention that, because I was on the NCAA women's basketball call yesterday, so I'm watching you guys' tweet. As soon as the Weidemeyer, the first thing I thought about, Baylor Cupp. What's he like? I mean, because everybody was saying that, so I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So there's still a lot going on in Aggie land. I know I wrote 3 stories about 3 different sports yesterday. Cease, you're doing that every day. There's a lot going on. Let's quickly touch on I'll just covered volleyball last night. They lost both games to Florida. The SEC announced that they're not going to make up any more of those postponed series. So unless A&M makes the NCAA tournament, their season is done. They came out in the latest RPI as ranked 193, so I don't see that as happening. Soccer's going on right now. They're gearing up through that. So that is we'll definitely talk and have a little bit more soccer coming in the future. But that leaves softball and baseball. Let's end this podcast with a little baseball talk. Cease, you're the softball guru. I know you've split time between softball and women's basketball. Let's just have a brief synopsis of where softball is right now in their season and what you've seen from them.
I think it's going to be a great season to watch because they're going to be much improved. They have pitching, and in softball, you have pitching. You've got a chance. They've got a lot of young hitters. Really love Mackenzie Herzog, a leader. She's great in the circle, 8-1. The A&M softball team will be much improved. Now, is it going to be a league title? No. But is it going to be closer to 12-12, breaking even? Yes. And I think that's great improvement when the last time they had a full season, they were 6-18. So the wind is blowing out at Davis Diamond this year, not in. Things are better out there.
And they have South Carolina this weekend.
South Carolina, a team that they should win. This is a series they got to win. They got 8 of them. South Carolina was picked 3 spots above them. They lost all 3 to Arkansas. You're at home. This is a weekend that A&M needs to win at least 2 out of 3.
Well, we'll put a pin in softball right now until women's basketball gets over, and we can definitely break that down a little bit in the future. But baseball is having a little bit of an interesting one this year. I don't think I quite know what they are, and I don't know if they quite know what they are yet, coming off of the COVID-shortened season last year. I think there is certainly a lot of frustrations from how last season ended and the ability and the talent that they had that left for the MLB draft last year. It's a year that you can say, well, the pitching is not quite there. And then they come back and strike out, 15, 16, 13 batters in a weekend. And then they go into SEC play and put up some runs against Florida, but can't necessarily win a game against them. So they start 0-3 and then they lose a game to Rice. But it's a very roller coaster season. And I know y'all I've probably watched a little bit more than y'all covering the things, but Cease, you covered some games. Alex, you keep touch. Here's my question. I go back and forth on if this is a good offensive team or not. And the inclination that I have first is to say, yeah, it's not necessarily great. They're not producing runs like they should. But if you want to compare and contrast, I would go back to the 2019 season, the one that ended with it was Braden Shoemake's last season. It ended with the Morgantown Regional in West Virginia. And you go back and think about that streak that they had through the end of that season, into the SEC tournament, and then into that regional, where they just absolutely could not buy a hit. And not only could they not buy a hit, they weren't putting barrels on any balls. And as Cease, I know you're a baseball guy, as a baseball guy, you don't necessarily look at if balls are falling in or home runs for the overall health of a offense. You look at barreled balls. And this is a team that can barrel up the ball. They can get hits when they need to get them at times. And they put up 4 runs against Florida, number 5, Florida's Friday night starter, which in a Friday night SEC game, 4 runs should be enough to win a ball game. This is an above average offense. I think it's an above average pitching staff when they're not walking and hitting batters. They just can't seem to put all the phases of their game together in one good game to win an important game.
Travis, I love your statement, above average, because that's what I think this team is. I've covered 2 games and listened a little bit at radio, followed all your stories, whatever. I think that this is about a 15-15 team. And the problem is they're a little above average, but you're in the SEC. You have to be better than a little above average if you want to be good. And I saw 2 average pitchers the other night dominate their lineup. And that's not good when you're going to face a Friday night guy in the SEC that's really good every week. So can they go 17-13, which would be great? Yeah, they could. Could they go 13-17? Yeah, I think that's where I'm putting them at in between here. And I don't know which way they're going to go because they have the pitching that can really be good, but then they also struggle at times. Childress was horrible against Florida after being so good for 2 or 3. So, it's a little bit like the softball team. I feel there's a lot of hope out there, but, starting 0-3, man, that puts you behind the 8 ball right off the bat, and you're going to win here. But, the bottom line is we're seeing baseball and softball. I'm looking at the plus side this year, and I'm hoping they get closer to that 17-13, and there's a regional and super regional. So, forever the optimist as a sports writer even.
Alex?
Yeah, this is a big 4-game stretch for the Aggies. This is a series that I think that's winnable against Georgia. Georgia lost 2-3 to Tennessee last week. And then, you play a Tuesday game against Texas, and Texas is by far the better team. But we know that when rivalry game is on, anything can happen. And it's at home. That's a game A&M wants to win. And I think, if A&M could get a series win against Georgia, that really boosts your confidence going into a big game Tuesday. And man, what a win over Texas would do for the Aggies. And, if they lose that game, that's a game they expect to lose, but A&M's got to get back on that upswing if they want to get back to that 15-15, what we're talking about after getting swept by Florida weekend 1 in the SEC.
If you really want to look at the overall health of this A&M team, it goes back to exactly what Rob Childress preaches in his press conference, and that is, are his pitchers walking and hitting batters? Are they allowing free bases? Because it's an offense, like we said, that's a little bit above average. They're going to be able to put enough runs to win some games, but if the pitching staff is walking a lot of batters, giving a lot of free passes, they're not going to probably have the offense to overcome that kind of deficit. And so that I think pitching struggles are going to be the difference between those two margins, Cease, that you mentioned earlier. I think that, when we talk about above average, I think that A&M is a little bit above average. I look across the country and see what some of these other prominent baseball schools are doing this season. I think if A&M was in any of their in just about any other conference right now, they'd be a front runner in the conference. But the SEC is just that stacked this year, like you said. I mean, if you look at the D1 baseball, I think the top 7 schools are all SEC schools. It's just a kind of an unreal baseball season for the SEC. And it does go back to the fact that the one thing that everyone I've talked to continues to talk about this season is the fact that with seniors, fifth-year seniors getting to return, teams are just more stacked than usual. And that doesn't even necessarily include the SEC. Actually, what has impressed more people through this is that you go to and play one of these mid-major non-conference or midweek games, and they have pitchers who are coming in the late innings who are throwing mid to low 90s, and you just don't see that from the mid-majors, having that kind of depth arms. So when you look at maybe some of the struggles that A&M have had in some of those mid-major games, and you look across the country at sometimes these teams that are getting upset in midweek games for several top 25 teams, it's just because the depth of talent that is in college baseball this season is probably unrivaled to just about any season because of the amount of players they're able to have and how small the MLG draft was last year.
You're right. A&M just needs to listen to their good bullpen catcher they have covering them, so they'll be okay. And listen to his signals.
There you go. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll enjoy this little roundtable. We'll probably be bringing it back this fall on the My Aggie Nation podcast. So for Alex Miller and Robert Cessna, I'm Travis Brown. This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We'll see you next week.